Hi everyone, Josh here, and this is my review of the PlayStation 3 version, although ostensibly as well the 360 version, but note that I will differentiate what is different from it, of Dante's Inferno, the third game in EA's new IP rush, following Mirror's Edge and Dead Space. And this is something that I don't know if I've commented on this channel before or not, but I've said to many people in the past I really admire in an era of video gaming when everything is a sequel. Not that being a sequel is bad, don't get me wrong, in gaming more often than not, it's probably a better thing because you have a chance to improve on gameplay mechanics. Unlike movies, we are not quite as reliant on the great story having to win us over. So, in that light, like I said, it's usually not that bad, but at the same time, it is always nice to see a fresh competitor coming out, even if its inspirations are clearly worn on its sleeve. In this case, Dante's Inferno is basically God of War. And that's not really a bad thing. I know a lot of people have chewed the game out because of this, but frankly, I really do not see too much problem in taking a gameplay system, even if it is as shamelessly ripped off as it is here, from another game, as long as you do things that that game does not, and it is still fun to play with. And in that regard, yes, it is still fun to play with, so it works. And as well, I do think Dante's Inferno does bring something that God of War did not. And that's a lot of atmosphere, I think, or at least a different kind of atmosphere. Now, I'm going to start with the story here, and pardon if I'm rambling a little on this, but there is actually quite a bit to say about this story. First off, I wanted to say that this is not technically really an adaptation of the poem by Dante Alighieri. Loosely inspired, I guess is best to say, and I don't think it's a heinous deed that these publishers have committed by taking this source material and forming it into something completely different, because I still think the final product is entertaining. Now, having said that, I gotta say, the story has its problems, to say the least. I'll try not to get into too many spoilers, but yeah, I'll go on. In short, instead of Dante needing to redeem his sins by going down to hell, being led by Virgil, Dante is an ex-crusader in this one, and Beatrice's soul is taken by Satan down into hell, so you have to go and get back her soul, and there's a whole lot of different things in between. The main problem I have with the story is not actually its concept. Frankly, the bad guy takes your girl plot has been around in video gaming since its inception, and popularized by everything from Mario to just like over so many games, especially in the 80s. There was a ton of stuff like that. Regardless, like I said, it's not a bad plot. I mean, if you saw it as a movie, it would probably be pretty crappy, but for a game, it does provide adequate inspiration. And, or motivation, sorry. And, I gotta say, the only thing I really have a problem with is that elements just come out of nowhere. And this really isn't spoiling anything, guys, because this, happens pretty early in the game. But your father is in hell. And the problem is, you didn't really hear much or anything about your father prior to him being in hell, so the whole revelation of what he's done and why he's there really doesn't make much difference to you, because you've only just been introduced to him. And this happens a couple times throughout the game, most notably later in the game, and like I said, I won't spoil anything, but there are quite a few moments like this, and I really kind of wonder why, because the beginning of the story is action-packed, sure, but really leaves you kind of wondering why everything is happening. I mean, if you've played the demo or not, regardless, basically you start out in a flashback sequence where you're in you're battling the Crusades in Jerusalem, and you're almost 2 minutes after gameplay, you're killed by one of Saladin's soldiers, and Death comes to take you. You kill Death, and this is only, again, 5 minutes into the game. You already get a cinematic, Beatrice is killed, Satan is coming, and within 10 to 15 minutes, you're already in hell. And you barely know why you're there, why this huge-ass cross is on your chest, and don't get me wrong. I understand the structure of the story to reveal things slowly as the game is progressing. And I actually like the way in which it's told with these animated flashbacks that zooms in onto your cross for. I think it's a cool idea. I could have used more of the CG cinematics. There's only about 3 of them in the entire game. But overall, I like that idea. The problem is, they should have introduced just a little more at the beginning, because it just seems entirely pointless. And other than that, I just think the ending, and again, I won't say anything, really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you look back on the plot, there's a huge many plot holes, and particularly the ending cinematic. I don't know why they had to do that. Just seems ridiculous to me. I mean, I understand the purpose of it, but I can't see it happening. Anyway, regardless though, I gotta say, for all this babbling about the story, I think it actually still kind of holds up, if only because in a game we are getting the atmosphere quite right in this, and each circle of hell is appropriately grotesque. Later in the game, with the later circles, not quite as impressive, kind of off kilter, don't really have a huge lot of emotional tie-in, or even imagery, like fraud, for instance, is there's nothing in fraud to suggest that there are any kind of fraudulent people in there or what's happening to them. I mean, it doesn't relate. If you're in gluttony, there's things, people being cooked in mud, eating each other because they can't satisfy their own hunger. Because they were gluttons in life, they're forever deprived of it in the afterlife. And I think that's a really cool punishment. I've always enjoyed Alighieri's poem because of this really intense imagery. And particularly in Limbo, they do a good job in this. I like the idea of turning like the unbaptized babies into these enemies that swarm you in dark enclosed rooms. It's pretty creepy. Not scary, considering it's pretty hard to be scared when you have a 7-foot scythe in your hand and magical powers, but, sorry, holy quote-unquote powers. But I think it works for the most part. And it really elevates the story, even when it is sometimes really silly, to a point where you almost care. Not really all the time care, but it's more than enough motivation to go on because you want to see just how much worse things can get. Like I said, unfortunately, the game does falter near the end, but the final circle does provide enough good imagery in and of itself. And while it's all too short, it does end the game well enough. I do think the game clips off after about Anger or the City of Dis. Oh! No, no, no. Violence is definitely a good one, too. So Woods of the Suicides is pretty great section. Anyway, enough of this babbling. I realize I'm going massively over time. This really shouldn't be that long, but this is a lot to think about this, because I'm probably overthinking this much more than the developers were, but I think it is worth talking about, frankly. And I'm going to be reviewing Dante's Inferno, an animated epic, which is the animated, I guess, companion piece slash somewhat of the same adaptation, using the same vague story general lines of this game, of the poem, but it's an animated anthology, so different circles are done by different animation teams. Anyway, I'll get to that later. For now, let's just stop with the story, say, I enjoy the atmosphere. I don't think the story in and of itself is good, but the atmosphere elevates it to a level where it is acceptable. Now, getting on to the gameplay, like I said, I really don't have much of a problem with this series kind of riffing off of, to put it lightly, God of War quite heavily, because it's still an entertaining style, still an entertaining way to play, and frankly, it makes sense within the context of the story and the game world, so what can I say? There is a lack of weapons. You only really get 2 per se, but I do think there is a good enough amount of diversity. This really isn't an in-depth fighting system. Devil May Cry, Ninja Gaiden easily outmaneuver it, but it's along the lines of something about God of War, I'd say. So if you without going over God of War too much, but if you like that kind of thing and don't mind that level of repetition, you're going to be perfectly fine with this. And I think repetition can be excused if it is satisfying, and again, they have definitely nailed the satisfying aspect of it. I did not like the quick time events portions where you had to move the analogs. I thought that was kind of awkward, but for the most part, really enjoyable. Not a whole lot of variety, like I said, but the environments tended themselves quite nicely. And also, I want to say the platforming in this is really good. I actually really enjoyed that. You can do a lot of rappelling, and I just generally enjoy the transition between circles when this platforming takes place, when you're just constantly going downwards. It really gives you a feeling of momentum down to the bottom of hell, and was really pleasing. Lastly, I wanted to say that the graphics and sound generally really good. Graphics quite nice, except when close-ups of in-game cinematics sometimes don't look all that great, but more than enough to please you. One thing I did want to note as well on that is that the walls that you climb on have people behind them, and this is a good effect at first, but they keep using it throughout the circles, and it kind of loses its kind of luster as you go on. Sound-wise, the score is really gloomy but powerful, enjoyable. Lastly, I did want to say, and I'm over time here now, but I did want to say that the PS3 edition does come with a lot of extras, a few making-of documentaries, the actual digital translation of the poem itself, the soundtrack, and free credit for DLC coming out in April, which looks fantastic. It has a level creator, or multiplayer online co-op, and a new prequel level, new costume. It looks great. I can't wait for it. Basically, if you like Dante's Inferno, if you like games that try for something to be just more than games, and don't mind a little sensationalism, and you like God of War, basically, You will enjoy this game. I'd advise you to pick up Dante's Inferno. It's pretty good, frankly. I enjoyed it quite a bit.